فکر نکنی نفهمیدم چی کار داری میکنی. ضمناً جعفر عمدن گاهی این کارا رو میکنن که بدونیم تحت تعقیبیم، بدونیم مواظبمون هستن. شگرداشون هم معلومه. اول یه پرونده سیاسی میبندن، جاسوس موساد، سیا، اینتلیجنس سرویس. بعد از توش یه پرونده اخلاقی هم در میاد. اینجا رو واسه آدم زندون میکنن. بیرونی ها از زندان آزاد شدی، ولی بیرون زندان بزرگتری میشه. نزدیکترین دوستاتو بدترین دشمنات میکنن. بعدش فکر میکنی که یا باید بذاری بری فرار کنی، یا اینکه روزی 100 بار آرزو کنی برگردی اون تو.
Hello, my name is Parvaneh Farid. I'm a PhD candidate at the University of Winchester. This paper on women, law and disorder is for Queen's University Belfast, 2015. The name of my paper is The Women of My Life. My paper would come under a number of the suggested themes: political activism, resistance movements, citizenship, women in state institutions, women and crime, legislators affecting women, and women employed by the state. If you haven't guessed by that which group of women it is referring to, it is the human rights activist women of Iran, of which I'm a member. Auto-ethnography. The Women of My Life, also the title of a current visual work of mine, embraces a number of women who have been and still are influencing the formation of my identity and my perception of social and political order and disorder as an Iranian-born artist in exile. These women are outstanding, in my opinion, for addressing one or more characteristics of a healthy woman, being a mother, a fighter, a spiritual being, and also a sensual female character. The said visual work is a life-size mosaic figure which frames the jigsaw-shaped images of the women of my life, where Nasrin Sotoudeh, a human rights activist and lawyer, is placed at the center of its heart and mind at the present time. This work is not static and would be modified as I and the circumstances will change. Nasrin Sotoudeh, born in 1963 in Tehran, is one of Iranian's most prominent human rights lawyers and activists, whose political imprisonment has repeatedly attracted international attention. Nasrin obtained her license to practice law in 2003, and from then she has focused on women's rights, and that includes taking part in organizations such as Defenders of Human Rights Center and the Society for Rights of Children. The latter is dedicated to defend the prisoners of conscience, supporting their families, reporting on human rights situation in Iran, and public education. In the midst of post-2009 election turmoil, after speaking out against what Nasrin saw as injustice, she reported in an interview with the Los Angeles Times. However, the security forces cut off her cell phone and accused her to maintain contacts with counter-revolutionary media. To describe her position then, Nasrin Sotoudeh said, "We as defense lawyers working on human rights are under so much pressure and so many restrictions, and the news around us is tightening, and we are insulted and threatened so much and verbally abused. What makes me feel helpless, desperate, and bitter is that our attempt to help our clients is doomed and in vain." Consequently, in September 2010, after having her offices raided by security forces, Nasrin was arrested and brought to trial on charges including propaganda against the system and acting against national security. Nasrin was initially sentenced to 11 years imprisonment and banned from practicing law for 20 years. These photographs shows Nasrin meeting her husband outside the court. The most widely reported episode of her imprisonment took place between October and December 2012, when Nasrin Sotoudeh yet again embarked on a hunger strike, this time to protest against a travel ban on her 12-year-old daughter. She ended the hunger strike when the ban was lifted. Since 2009, Nasrin's actions have earned her international recognition and many international awards, including the PEN Barbara Goldsmith Freedom to Write Award and the European Parliament's Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought. In June 2013, York University in Canada awarded her an honorary doctorate in law. In an acceptance speech written from Evin prison, she wrote, "Women, men, children, and old people, regardless of color, race, gender, language, ethnicity, and religious belief, have the right to enjoy their human rights. They have a right to immunity from illegal persecution. They have a right to fair trial, to have access to lawyers who would continue to defend their clients without fearing persecution, intimidation, and threats." Nasrin was released from prison as a diplomatic gesture days after an address by Iranian President Hassan Rouhani to the United Nations in September 2013, not long after his presidential election. Nasrin's permission to practice, however, was not reinstated. Amnesty International, which has dedicated significant attention to her case, responded by welcoming her freedom but holding that she shouldn't have been imprisoned in the first place. Following the recent episodes of acid attack on women in Iran, The Guardian reported on Saturday, 26 October 2014, that Nasrin Sotoudeh was temporarily detained while protesting in Tehran against the acid attack on women. The images show some victims of the attack. The crimes coincided with the passage of a new parliamentary bill that allows private citizens to enforce morality laws. No one is arrested in connection with this series of crimes. However, the photographer who aimed to report the protest is still in jail. Currently, Nasrin is active in civic gatherings and spent time standing in front of the Iran Barristery Association holding a placard which demands the right to work for all. This photograph shows Nasrin shouting at the guard outside the Iran Barristery Association saying, "Do not frighten us. We do not consider fear. And as long as the breach of the laws is disguised as lawful act, we would remain here." Her appearance in Jafar Panahi's Golden Bear Prize winner film Taxi is notable. Going back to my current visual work, The Women of My Life, I should state that this piece of work is a byproduct of another aspect of my project, Map of My Metaphysical Journey, which has been developing along the lines of a quest for understanding the concept of the line. Beside Nasrin Sotoudeh, there are many other animated and influential women in my life, and now I would like to draw attention to a few of them. Looking at the process of emancipation of women in Iran since the mid-19th century, a number of women stand out as historic turning points: طاهره، فروغ فرخزاد، فرخ روپارسا، شیرین عبادی، قمر وزیری، گوهر عشقی، اولیا روحیزادگان، ریحانه جباری، فرح پهلوی, and many others. طاهره, born in 1814 or 17 and executed in 1852. طاهره is known as the first Iranian woman after Islam who publicly removed her veil in the mid-19th century, saying, "You can kill me as soon as you want, but you cannot stop the emancipation of women in Iran." Almost all of Tahire's writings have been destroyed or lost. However, a very few poems of hers which have survived classed her as a poet rather than a philosopher. Farukh Farrokhzad, born in 1935 and died in 1967. When Farukh began to work as a poet and a filmmaker in Iran mid-20th century, for the first time in the history of Persian poetry, a feminine language was heard, as many state. Unfortunately, Farukh died in her early 30s. However, during her short period of life, she was much ignored and shamed, even by the so-called intellectual section of her society, for her valorous feminine attitude in life, which were enhanced and much highlighted in her poetry. Despite being much ignored and even overwritten by the Islamic government almost 48 years after her death, Farukh definitely stands as one of the most celebrated role models for many Iranian women. Farrokhru Parsa, born in 1922, executed 1980, a physician, educator, and parliamentarian, served as Minister of Education in Iran and was the first female cabinet minister of an Iranian government during Pahlavi era. Parsa was an outspoken supporter of women's rights and was executed in 1980 after Islamists came to power in Iran. Shirin Ebadi, born in 1947. Shirin is an Iranian lawyer, a former judge, and a human rights activist, and founder of Defender of Human Rights Center in Iran. In October 2003, Ebadi was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for her significant and pioneering efforts for democracy and human rights, especially women's, children's, and refugee rights. Shirin was the first ever Iranian to receive that prize. She has been in exile since 2009 in the UK due to the increase in persecution of Iran citizens who are critical of the current regime. Qamar Vaziri, born in 1905 and died in 1959. Qamar is known as the first woman in Iran to sing in front of men, and still has an excellent reputation for being a diva of traditional Persian art music. She is known as a pioneer who paved the way for the Iranian female singers to come. Gohar Eshqi, almost 2 years after the death of dissident blogger Sattar Beheshti under torture while in police detention, his mother Gohar Eshqi is still demanding justice through public appearances, interviews, and open protests. Her small home has since become an informal venue for the human rights activists in Iran, and she has become a popular theme for journalists and activists, including Madaran Park Lale, a group of Iranian mothers whose children have lost their lives in the fight for freedom in Iran. Olya Ruhizadegan, the writer of the book Olya's Story, gave an eyewitness account to the United Nations of the breach of human rights in Iran. She disclosed and wrote a detailed diary of the struggles and executions of 10 Baha'i women inmates in 1980s, the youngest who was just 16 years old. Olya took refuge in the UK in early 80s, since then taking part in many media interviews and giving many talks about her experiences as a prisoner of conscience. Reyhaneh Jabbari, born in 1988 and executed in 2014. Reyhaneh was in prison from 2007 until her execution by hanging in October 2014 for killing her alleged assailant. She published a story about what happened to her in prison, including solitary confinement. Her claim of self-defense for rape was proven untrue, and the evidences supporting that were overlooked by the court. Amnesty International commented that Reyhaneh was convinced after a flawed investigation and that her claims that another person was present at the scene were not properly investigated. Farah Pahlavi, born in 1938. Empress Farah Pahlavi pursued her interest in social work, the emancipation of women, sport and art. Most of her time was devoted to the promotion of social welfare and culture, and she was patron of 24 educational, health, cultural, and charity organizations. She paid frequent visits to remote parts of Iran to obtain first-hand knowledge of the life and aspirations of farmers and ordinary people. Empress Farah has been responsible for many cultural movements. She also supported young Iranian artists and was driving force behind a number of specialized art museums to preserve and publicize ancient and traditional art and architecture. Should the name of Empress remain tied to only two spheres of action in Iran, it would certainly be the one of culture and that of the emancipation of women. And I leave you with this photomontage image of Nasrin Sotoudeh as Madonna, and also a message to this symposium that she gave over the phone. The secret to success is of that turning point when you are exhausted of trying over and over, but you still keep going. Thank you.